As Hitler marched triumphantly across Western Europe in the early summer of 1940, his fellow dictator in Italy, Benito Mussolini, dreamt of a similar campaign further south.
La vittoria è per noi, per I primi!
His dream was to build a new Roman Empire that would see Italy expand not only along the northern Mediterranean coast, but south through North Africa. He would turn the Mediterranean into Mare Nostrum, our sea. But it was a dream that would turn into a disaster. It would lead, in due course, to Mussolini's death and fatally overextend his German ally. At the start of the war, Italy already controlled Libya and Abyssinia, Ethiopia today. Mussolini calculated that if he could take British-controlled Egypt and Sudan, he would be able to create a huge swathe of Italian-controlled territory. It looked like an easy campaign. Italy had 10 times more troops in the region than Britain. In September 1940, Mussolini invaded Egypt and captured the small coastal town of Sidi Barrani. There, the Italians stopped and dug in. Britain gathered all available forces for a counterattack. On December the 6th, 1940, they moved in across the desert. Just 4 days later, they overran the Italian defenses. Nearly 40,000 Italians were taken prisoner. It was the first sign that the Italian army was in poor fighting shape. The remainder of the defeated Italians retreated back across the Libyan border. The British followed in hot pursuit. In barely a month, the Western Desert Force, as it was called, had advanced almost 600 miles across Libya. It now paused and dug in at the Libyan coastal town of El Agheila. Almost half of Italy's Libyan empire had been seized and over 100,000 Italian troops taken prisoner. Meanwhile, to the south, British forces invaded Italian-controlled Abyssinia. The fighting lasted for nearly 12 months. The rugged terrain made communications and transport difficult. But in the end, the Italians were forced to surrender. But even as Abyssinia was being secured, Mussolini's empire building was causing problems in another part of the Mediterranean. Nearly 2 years earlier, in April 1939, as part of his plan for a new Roman Empire, Mussolini had occupied Albania. The following year, he demanded Greece become an Italian colony. When the Greeks refused, he invaded. The Greeks were outnumbered more than 2 to 1, but they swiftly turned back the Italian advance. By the beginning of March 1941, the Italians had not only been pushed out of Greece, but out of much of neighboring Albania too. Britain's Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, promised help so the Greeks could finish the job. So it was that the British units in North Africa were told to abandon their Libyan adventure and ship much of the force across the Mediterranean to Albania. As the Italian troops were now pushed back, Mussolini's Balkan ambitions fell apart. The Italians were in deep trouble. It left Hitler with a problem. Should he divert troops from elsewhere in Europe to support his most important European ally, or should he abandon Mussolini to his fate? He decided to help. In April 1941, over 500,000 German troops swept down into Yugoslavia and Greece. For Germany, it would prove to be the beginning of a fateful entanglement with Mussolini's political dreams. But at first, all went well. The Greeks, despite British help, were unable to hold the Germans back, and in late April, the Axis forces captured the Greek capital of Athens. Some 30,000 men were evacuated to the British-controlled island of Crete. Hitler decided to flush them out. He had at his command some 22,000 parachute and glider-borne troops, backed up by 150 Stuka dive bombers. The landings began at first light on May the 20th. To begin with, they focused on the main airfields. The Allied forces were overstretched. There were incessant German air attacks. Two weeks later, it was all over. 15,000 Allied troops had to be evacuated. A further 18,000 were taken prisoner. The Axis powers now controlled much of the Mediterranean and the critical supply routes to North Africa. It looked as though Hitler's decision to support Mussolini had paid off. He was poised to drive Britain out of the entire region.